Mayong hapon ka natong tanan, and thank you for being here in this afternoon wherein the time is really good for an afternoon snap. But we are all here gathered to celebrate Alcina, and it's very refreshing to see students and teachers learning more about our local history. And for that, we are very thankful for the organizers, the National Commission for National Historical Commission of the Philippines, my God, and the government of Northern Samar, and of course for this session, the Ramon Abuetes Foundation Incorporated. This afternoon, allow me to talk about a different aspect of Visayan culture. Kanina, we were talking about religion. We're talking about very lofty things. And now let's somehow encounter the Precolonial Visaya through how they were living as people of the world, through how they appear, how they understand beauty, how they present themselves in clothing, and all of these aspects of their day-to-day life. So I call that the aesthetic lives of our pre-colonial Cebuanos, Visayans. So when we say aesthetics, it's a study of beauty and taste and concerned about the interpretation and the value of certain works of art, and the notions of beauty and creative expressions, and how these is perceived, experienced by pre-colonial people in their day-to-day life. That's what I want to discuss this afternoon in this presentation. And I would be, for this presentation, I have consulted these sources: the History of the Visayan People by Alcina, and the First Voyage Around the World by Pigafetta, the Boxer Codex, Barangay of William Henry Scott, and documents from the Blair and Robertson. And allow me to start with this image. I think kitang tanan, we're all familiar with this image, right? This is what? Sige, atong mga estudyante be. Mga humanities students sa UEP. Hala, wala dyan makatubag. Someone can raise his hand? Okay, this is a work by Michelangelo and the Sistine Chapel, right? Okay, in 1512, Michelangelo finished the Sistine Chapel. It's the time of high Renaissance in Europe. And then what happened 9 years after? Magellan arrived in the Philippines, 1521. So basically, kung ito nang itapad these pieces of history, it was in the history of art, the flourishing of Renaissance art. And that is the time that Magellan arrived in the Philippines. And so the framework of those colonizers, the Spaniards who came, was, in terms of their experience of art, is how they were able to see the different kinds of art and art forms in Europe. And in the writings of Alcina, when he wrote the Historia, he somehow used that kind of framework to look at art, especially that he started his history with a tribute to Pliny the Elder, being the one he referenced his writing of the form and format of his writing of the Historia. And then in the history pod and development of art history, it was this book by Pliny the Elder that started a look into art, especially Greco-Roman art. And in that note, Alcina somehow used that kind of framework to look at and see and put value into the creative work, artistic work of the Visayans. And I would say Alcina somehow started the theorization and looking for a theory of art among the local Visayans, and started even look into the history of art making in these islands. And so from that framework, that art is something that we look, that we appreciate, that we take pleasure, that the value of, the artistic value of certain works of art is intrinsic to the object and is devoid of its social context. So magtanaw ka og sculptor, painting, naagyo na siya meaning, magtuyok-tuyok ang kaninduton kuno niya, the beauty of the painting inside that piece of work. And when Alcina tried to develop the chapters on art and the different crafts and artisanal practices in the islands, he would always saying walay equivalent to painting and sculpture and all these Western art forms. But then he would say that despite there is no equivalent, direct equivalent to painting and to sculpture and other art forms from Europe, the Visayans are very creative, the Visayans are very talented, and he depicted the creative pursuits of the Visayans not as pursuits to create objects of art, but to create life, to make their life, day-to-day life, comfortable and pleasurable and enjoyable. So, munang musud, perhaps the idea that the aesthetic lives of the pre-colonial Bisaya is instead of looking at art as objects, we look at it as integration of these things into the life of how art can make our lives pleasing and make our lives comfortable. So murag inana ang framework na ni Alcina when he tried to look into art among the Visayans. And I would start again with this definition of Alcina on the Bisaya. The first chapter was on the trying to look into the origin of the Bisaya. And instead of looking into geographical or the distribution of and migration of people that could somehow cause the thank you for that intermission. Murag mag-drill ta, mamarog siguro ta, no? We stand up and do some stretching. But very apt to discuss that Alcina, instead of looking into where exactly geographic source of the Bisaya as a term that we in the Visayan Islands are called, si Alcina would say nga kita, the Visayans, the meaning from our own language would mean a happy man, a man of a fine and pleasant disposition, malipayon, magsigig katawa. Instead, we will get frightened with that frightened. We will laughing with that experience. So malipayon, masadyaon, and he provided several words: aya, makaya, mamikaya, masaya, mimaya, to mean joy, person of fine disposition. All of these words. So perhaps the encounter of Alcina with us, our pre-colonial ancestors, would be somehow a more joyful encounter, pleasant encounter, and so we will look into this disposition, happy disposition, and somehow at the end of this, think of what Bisaya aesthetics is. Alcina would say that there is no permanent pre-colonial architectural structures that he was able to see some when he arrived in Cebu. But then after several years, all of those houses that he saw when he arrived were all gone because the people started to adopt the Spanish way of building their homes. But Alcina would say that perhaps there was no development in sculpture comparable to Europe because of the impermanence of the architectural structures, because in Europe, the palaces, the churches would mean that you have to decorate the neutrality of stone or the massive structures with flourishes, with paintings and sculpture. But because of that, wala ni develop ang other art forms that comes with architecture. And he would show us this illustration of houses in his Historia. So we could see that there are some houses perched on trees, and ang mga haligi are well above the ground. And architect Joel Glico would contend that the impermanency of pre-colonial architecture is a manifestation of the pre-colonial people's conception of space, wherein the natural environment permeates through the private domestic space. So actually, our conception of house is not within the four haligi of the house, but then our home is the entire environment where our house is located. And that conception of space never really encouraged or made us create big structures that would disrupt the flow of energy or the flow of people in a certain environment of space. So with that, and if there is no strong building tradition of structures or architectural structures, Resel Moharisama would say that in pre-colonial times, architectural structures was not the dato's prized possession. But rather, what's important for the dato was the number of people under him and the number of able, warm bodies that can fight and protect the community. So that's how the dato becomes powerful, the number of people that is within his realm, his influence. And so I would look at, in this presentation, you would somehow look at, instead of looking for structures, we turn to the body as the very site of pre-colonial decorative art, as Alcina would later on in this presentation would depict. Alcina, in Book 3 of Part 1, would say that the creative pursuits of the Bisaya, ang ilang pagkamamugnaon, pagka-creative, na ay duha ka categories. Una, the first category is in reference to the person, his decency and integrity and his personal modesty, which depends upon his clothing and other necessary adornments to nature. This is from him. And the second category consists of the other things which one requires for his undertaking, and at the same time for one desires so necessary for a well-ordered life. So first, about how we treat our bodies, how our bodies exude our own personal beauty, and the other one is the beauty and the things that we use that will give us a well-ordered life. So as a prized possession, the human body is well celebrated and decorated. Decorative expressions are geared towards the endowment of the human body with implements and ornamentation that marks the bearers with distinction in society and commands certain role in community affairs. And later on, I would show this. We have seen depictions from the Baxter Codex, from the archaeological artifacts, the gold collection being presented now that you can see in Ayala Museum. That's some pottery, illustrations from colonial manuscripts. For example, this the Baxter Codex. So when we say pre-colonial beauty and our own bodies, the pre-colonial bodies, what becomes apparent if you read Alcina is that there was a good practice of cosmetic refinement and bodily ornamentation. So kanang plastic surgery na to karon, uso na kay na didto sa pre-colonial times. And let's see naunsa. Even these women, according to Alcina, is in this unpolished civilization, ato ang civilization, were tainted with it. For no matter how uncomely one may seem, bisag dili pa kay tagwapahon, pingo tag ilong, there is always a strong penchant to appear beautiful. So maninguha gyud ta, we would make all our efforts to make ourselves look beautiful. And what were the different ways that people at that time tried to do to make themselves presentable and beautiful? First, they have the decorative dentistry, and the most impressive example of Visayan dentistry where it's gold work. So, ang ngipon, they would put pegs of gold, triangular ang design, and as you can see in this sample, and when they smile golden. They smile gleaming and shimmering with the gold in their tooth. It's called pusad, and a general term for gold work for the teeth, where they were inlays, crowns, or plating. The manunusad was a dental worker, a professional who got paid for his services. So there was specific person doing all of the dental works. And then, of course, we are familiar with this, the tattoos. Batok was a general term for tattoos, and it also meant the marking of snakes or lizards or any design printed or stamped on. So this illustration is from the Baxter Codex. And tattoos were symbols of male valor. Many of us know about this, but let me repeat. They were applied only after a man had performed in battle with fitting courage, and like modern military decorations, they accumulated with additional feats. So yung lalaki ka and you fight and you go with the mangayaw, when you return from that journey and you can establish you were able to kill your enemies, you'll be awarded with this distinction. You will be allowed to be tattooed. Any applied on one who had not killed or captured an enemy were scorned as counterfeit. Moreover, a tattooed man who was considered cowardly was compared to a how lizard, a large black and yellow reptile tattooed all over but extremely timid. We're familiar man with how, no? Monitor lizard, very big, and has some patterns in his body, but very slow and natatakot. They would run when someone is there instead of fighting. So if you would put tattoo on your body and you have not distinguished yourself in warfare, or you have not killed your enemy, then you will be compared to that lizard, monitor lizard, or how. The first tattoos a person receiver applied to the legs, beginning at the ankles and ending at the waist. So first, balik nimo from war, you can get the tattoo from the legs, and then it would accumulate some more after some more battles. Chest tattoos, which look like breastplates, less frequently tattoos on the abdomen, only came after further action in battle. And still later, those on the back, the whole back, widest fields for the tattooer's ancestry. So the tattoo artist will create designs because it's the biggest part of the human body where they can play around with their designs. And facial tattoos from ear to chin to eye were restricted to the boldest and toughest warriors. So the chieftain of Cebu, Humabon, as described by Pigafetta, has some fire patterns or designs in his face when they made the encounter, Magellan and Humabon. So he must be he must be a bold and tough warrior. And then we again know, based on some of the archaeological findings, that there was a practice of skull molding. Visayan skull molding was done with a device called tangad, a comb-like set of thin rods bound to a baby's forehead by bandages, fastened at some point behind. So, if a flap dito, ang agtang, and to create this kind of, mo recede siya to the... And then, we know in Bisaya, there's a saying nga, ngay hangin ang ulo. Mura og, something crazy, that person is crazy, something to do with... and so that kind of expression came. Those who didn't practice skull molding, they would say they were the crazy ones, the unintelligent ones, less talented people, because they have not undergone the skull molding process. And of course, there was pierced ears. So a lot of piercing happened sa ears of our ancestors. Both men and women wore earrings. They had their ears pierced. Men with 1 or 2 holes per lobe. So lalaki, dalawang 2 holes. And for women, there were 3 or 4 to accommodate a variety of ornaments. Earrings with or without pendants were held by thin gold pins run through the ear and fastened behind. But earplugs required holes as wide as 2 fingers or lobes distended into loops through which a person could stick his fist. So lumalaki ng lumalaki yung holes of that you can put your 2 fingers through the holes or even your entire fist. Because they would, the ornaments, later on I will talk about the kind of earrings that they were put into the holes. They were very big, round, and they would fit into the holes. And in other descriptions, the earlobes even would reach to the shoulders, rest on the shoulders. And then they have some ornamentations with the hair. These Visayans wear their hair very long, both the men and the women, and they take great pride in it, combing it very often with fragrant oils they make for this purpose. So manghiso, when we were kids, my parents would always put hiso oils on the hair to make it more shiny and fragrant. Often, the women would permit it to grow so long that it would sometimes touch the ground. It was so thick that they would bunch it up. So for women's hairstyle, many of them have a curl which they wear in ringlets about the forehead without iron or instruments. So kasi nag-recede na, no, nag-hair molding, the skull molding na siya. And so there's the kind of nag-recede na siya dyan. And they would put, to somehow look that part of the head pretty, they would put curls on their forehead for women. And then they tie up the hair with some gracefulness at the back of the head, rather high on the crown and in a rose-like fashion, almost as large as the head itself. So parang there's a sense of balance and proportion somehow if you imagine it. Nag-recede ang hair, ang head, ang skull, kasi may head molding. Tapos, may twirl dito. And then, kasi flatten, para siyang it look flat on the side. And then they would put the hair like a ball of petals of roses. So somehow it would balance out all of these forms in the face of the woman. And then they also use false hairs. They take great delight in making it bigger, the hair sa likod, the ball of hair. They take great delight in making it bigger and bigger, so much so that rare is the woman who does not keep adding a mass of false hair into her own as to create a spiral-like effect or rosettes. So parang gaganda talaga to make it like bigger. Para siyang katong Star Wars nga queen nga there's this big and some hairdo nga ilagay. But if you somehow imagine they somehow look beautiful. All of these parts put together. And then of course they would, as I mentioned earlier, use fragrances. They will put flowers into into their bunch of hair or the crown of flowers. And sometimes if you could get, there's some wear crowns and wreaths on their heads made of tinsel imported from China. Lacking these, for those who don't have these implements, they wear wreaths of flowers and roses picked from the fields to somehow to make para babango. For a man to touch such a hairdo was a terrible offense, but they were a handy target for other women, sampulong men to grab somebody by the locks. So magbugno ang mga babae, magbinirahay, they would bira the other women's hair. And again, not just the hair, they also kanang kilay nato karon nga kilay 2000 na pag millennium, but karon I don't know unsa tawag ana, but both men and women had their eyebrows shaved into thin arcs likened to a crescent moon. So limpyo kayo, magandang pagka-form ang mga kilay. And then men pluck their facial hairs with shells, so walay bunguton. So all the men, they would appear very clean, their face, because all of this facial hair, they remove all of this facial hair. And then the men gather their hair with the elegant sashes called pudong that they wrap around their heads. And for clothing, the basic garment were the G-string or bahag and tube skirt, what the Baranaw call malong, or a light blanket wrapped around instead. So Alcina would talk about that several times. He would go visit the homes of his parishioners, and some of them would be naked and would grab that malong or that piece of blanket and immediately would wrap their body, this cloth around their bodies. But more prestigious ones, the principales, they use other kinds of clothing. The lihin-lihin were added for public appearances and especially in formal occasions. There were blouses, tunics, loose smocks with sleeves, capes, or ankle-length robes. High-quality clothes had decorative strips added to the edges and ends. So you can see it in the Baxter Codex, the illustrations. And for the bahag, this piece of cloth is 4 or 5 meters long and something less than a meter wide. So unlike the bahag that we imagine now and we see often from other, especially from northern Luzon, ang bahag sa Bisaya, very long, 4 to 5 meters. And 1 meter ang iyahang width. And so they could really, there's a fantastic way Alcina described it on how to wrap the male body with the bahag, consuming all 4 to 5 meters of cloth. So di siya makita sa kilid ang legs. However, in the case of men who had personally killed an enemy, they were qualified to wear deep red ones. That's according to Alcina. All other men would wear their bahag in different colors. Only the red, the warriors and those who have killed their enemy can use red bahag. And the usual male headdress was the pudong or the turban. Commoners wore pudong of rough abaca cloth wrapped around only a few turns so that it was more of a headband than a turban and was therefore called pudong-pudong. For the ordinary natives, they would just wrap their heads several times around and it's called pudong-pudong. But the principales and the warriors, the red pudong was the insignia of the braves who have killed an enemy, as much as the bahag, the red bahag, is a symbol of that. But they can cover their head more than the ordinary ones. So the most prestigious kind of pudong, limited to the most valiant, was their G-strings made of pinayusan. So pinayusan is a very fine kind of abaca cloth. And that's they use for the pudong, especially for the warriors and for the principales. And such pudong were lengthened with each additional feat of valor. Real heroes, therefore, let one end hang loose with effective carelessness. So much like the tattoo na mag-accumulate, ang pudong ng warrior, yung end niya, the longer it is, that means marami ka ng war or enemies na napatay. So they would wear that, the longer that side, with great pride, because that would also mean that they are fierce warriors. And women wear hats and some veils, as described by Pigafetta about the Queen of Cebu when they arrived in Cebu. And there were like 3 servants bringing 3 more hats. And of course, in Alcina's Historia, he would talk about the jewelry, especially the gold jewelry that our ancestors wore. Both Visayan men and women wore earrings, earplugs, necklaces, and collars of beads, and gold chains, bracelets, anklets, finger rings, and brooches. These ornaments are mostly made of gold, shells, mother of pearl, precious stones, giant clam shells. So we have seen some of these pieces as described in the exhibition of gold jewelry in Ayala Museum. And I will just wrap up this because wala na akong time, but there was also some weaponry that they wear, heavily decorated, and also the more precious ones are made of gold. And all of this decoration, all of this ornamentation gives that human person wearing it a kind of prestige. And all of these things that attach to the body is a technology of enchantment as preferred by anthropologist Alfred Gell. So Alcina would say that the creative talents of the Bisaya is very high and very well developed. Women were tailors, and all men and women were tailors. Women were weavers, and all the men are carpenters. In short, everything that they have, tungod kay we were very adept with making our own things. Everything that they have, from the dwelling to the decorations, each one makes it all by himself. What they want, they know how to make it. That's what Alcina would say about the skills of our pre-colonial ancestors. But there were very specialized artisans. So if everyone could do the carpentry, the weaving, the specialized artisans are those that has something to do about making the body again beautiful. So the dentist, the jeweler, the one that would make all the weapons, they were specialized artisans. The tattoo artist, it's not made by anyone. And the quality of crafts, and Alcina would say, the goods that are found here without much effort are high quality, esteemed, some of them very valuable and others highly priced. If these natives were diligent and hardworking, they would become rich, but because they do not take the initiative, all comes to nothing. This is his repeated opinion about the Bisaya. We are very talented, we know how to do things, but we are somehow lazy to develop this into a full industry. He also mentioned about cleanliness, na 3 to 4 times tayo naliligo every day because of the heat, and to appear and to make ourselves fragrant. And this is a peculiar, and in the writing of Alcina, he would say he was trying to look at people with disability, and he could not find one. And then Alcina would write that there was a practice among women, pregnant women, that when their babies were born blind or lacking in limbs or humpbacks, the midwife would kill the baby And he would make a good explanation about that. And so, when they grow up, no one is disabled in the community or look miserable with their bodily deformity. But Alcina would say that he would make catechism to change this kind of practice. Okay, some pictures. I think the body is situated in a performative visuality. So there was an external showmanship and bodily performance that guide the bearing of the body in community. So we decorate the body. So how do we make the body ourselves in relation to others? And Alcina would say na the women would leave their homes to visit others. They walk very slowly, making 1,000 moves with their bodies, with one arm swinging freely. They consider this very fashionable. Ladies generally wore bracelets in sufficient number to attract attention with their juggling. So there's a purpose why they wear a lot of jewelry, and they would move very slowly so that they will make sounds, and the people would be warned that a lady of like a principales is coming to them, coming towards their house. And then the swinging motion of huge gold rings, like that glittering spangles dangled from the ladies' earrings, was part of their attractiveness. Alcina would describe that there is beauty in the wearing of the jewelry, because we were so brown, the gold would reflect very nicely on the complexion of the Bisaya. So if you put all of this jewelry and you do the little moves, and then the sun, high noon or the afternoon sun would hit the jewelry or the gold, it creates some glistening into the face and will make the face even pretty. The lady becomes very beautiful with the reflection of the gold, then jewelry, and the sun on the face. And then these kinds of movement around showing off the ceremonial dress or the jewelry, there's a feast that they call the buhis-buhis, when all of these principales would visit other homes. And then a great feast is thrown there in that village. And in this occasion, they are accustomed to great ostentation and vanity. They would wear the best they could to showcase or to make themselves beautiful, and to somehow show to the one hosting the party that they are of worthy. They come from a place of privilege in the other village. I will wrap up now. Wala nang time. Othering the colonizer, the decorations that our pre-colonial ancestors wore, they take pride with these practices, and they would early on, in the early years of colonization, they would make fun of the colonizers as mapura, as maputi, meaning untattooed. And they would make fun of the colonizers na walang golden implements in their tooth, as parang wild beast or wild animal. So the implements become a signifier that that the practice of ornamentation and bodily, what do you call that, shows a high kind of culture, well-developed kind of creativity, though dili lang siya ma-compare sa Western mode of art. And this kind of external manifestation of beauty and performativity, the historian Medina, writing about it, would say to celebrate the religious ceremonies with great pomp and spectacle, he would advise the other ministers to celebrate the religious ceremonies with great pomp and spectacle, for among the natives, no sense is so strong as sight. So dapat ipakita mo talaga, ipanghambog mo, kung sa Bisaya pa, ipanghambog mo in visual terms what you have. And so the native would quick to judge as insignificant any Spaniard whom they see abased and rugged, abanyaga, we call him abanyaga, that is low and base by birth. On the contrary, any Spaniard who would make a show, the natives would immediately call him Kapitan, although he does not deserve to be even a soldier, because that person would go around in lively vesture, and they would show off, but otherwise he would be called banyaga, or and this Bernabe de Villalobos, speaking about the pre-colonial visual traditions, would say to his fellows, the Bisaya ministers in the Visayas Islands, that if he wished to ascend to any dignity, although he would endeavor to be as humble as possible before God, he would show the utmost grandeur outwardly, so that the natives might recognize the majesty and dignity by the exterior. And I think this facilitated the Baroque art, the adaptation of Baroque art into the colonial art of the Philippines during the Spanish period, and from the decorated body to the colonized, Christianized body. And there was a lot of, in the teachings of the missionary, the friars who catechized, evangelized the Visayas, there are a lot of teachings on how to tame the body. And Rizal Mujeres calls it the catechisms of the body. And then this kind mortification, and then eventually would lead us to the new concept of decoration for the body into the decorations or for the church now, the body of Christ, and eventually into the saints, into the estofado, the Encarnacion, the paintings. Somehow the ostentations, the decorations, the adornments that once was directed towards the human body in colonial Spanish period would now be geared towards another concept of body, and that's the spiritual body, the body of Christ, and the saints. And eventually this facilitated the Bisaya aesthetics and its need for visual and performative articulations. Somehow facilitated the acceptance of and the spread of Christianity in the islands and the new traditions of Hispanic art in the Philippines. So again, I would end there, and perhaps we go back to the description of Alcina that Bisaya is a happy man, a man of a fine and pleasant disposition, and looking into all of those decorations, the dress, the vesture, the jewelry, and how they conduct themselves with others, the festivities, all of the rituals, then perhaps we could, Alcina is right that the Bisaya is a happy man and a man of a fine and pleasant disposition. And yes, I think we could still agree today that mayong kitag Bisaya, Cebuano especially, langas, loud, always laughing, buhakha kung katawa, we make fun with our mistakes. And I think that kind of disposition is very much seen in the aesthetic lives of pre-colonial Bisaya. Again, thank you for listening this afternoon to this long, winding discussion. But I hope you learned something from this lecture. Thank you.